A second and very different example of how science and religion has been thought to be brought into conflict is the question about the origins of human life on Earth. And we could see that as exemplified perhaps in particular in the 1860 debate between Huxley, who was known as Charles Darwin's bulldog, a fierce defender of Darwin's evolutionary theory of life, and Samuel Wilberforce, the Bishop of Oxford. They had a debate in Oxford in 1860 in which Samuel Wilberforce is supposed to have famously said that if we believed Huxley, then Huxley didn't seem to mind whether or not his grandfather was an ape or not. And following that debate, there were supporters of both sides who claimed that their hero had won this big clash between science and religion, with Huxley saying that he had ridiculed Wilberforce's arguments, and Wilberforce himself thinking that he had been victorious over Huxley's evolutionary theory. So, at least in the popular imagination, this is an archetype of conflict between science and religion. Wilberforce seems to have clearly thought that the evolutionary theory that Huxley was advancing, based on Charles Darwin's work, needed to be countered by a Christian affirmation that human beings had not descended from apes or other forms of non-human life. And Huxley's supporters seeming to think that science was in conflict with religion, and that in showing the truth of evolutionary theory, they would have done significant work in showing the problems with Orthodox Christian belief about the origins of human life. Now, it turns out that the debate and the wider context wasn't quite as simple as is reported in the popular imagination. There were many different reports of the debate, emphasizing different features. And it turns out that lots of contemporary Christians, unlike Wilberforce, were reasonably comfortable with the idea that human life could have had non-human origins, were reasonably comfortable with the idea that Christian theology could imagine a creative process through which God brought human beings into being through an evolutionary process rather than some miraculous intervention. But it's clear that that question of how did human life originate on Earth was seen by Wilberforce, and is still seen by many Christians today, as a significant site of concern and conflict between scientific views. There are still many Christians that would want to take a creationist view of origins of the earth, life on earth, and of human life in particular, although many other Christians think that there could be a compatibility between Christian theology and evolutionary theory. But here, just like that question of extraterrestrial life, we have a second site where human uniqueness seems to be the focus of a potential conflict between Christian theology and scientific understandings. Are human beings unique in the world? It's a question in the extraterrestrial context, in the sense of whether or not Earth is the only place that supports life. But in this question of human origins, the question about human uniqueness is, are human beings utterly unique in relation to the kinds of life that came before them? And how could we think about the boundary of human uniqueness in relation to human origins? So the question of human origins is a second site of interest and conflict between Christian theology and scientific understandings.